Hi, I'm Steve Sapourn, and thank you so much for joining me on the Neuro's Journey podcast. This is really a dream job. It's my life's purpose, and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're struggling with addiction or someone you love is, this episode is for you because you don't have to succumb to that struggle. But honestly, even if you think addiction has nothing to do with you, keep listening because I'm going to reframe the whole view of addiction and talk about it in a way that relates to most of us. We're going to talk about why willpower fails, what's actually happening in your brain, and a treatment that's showing results we've never seen before. In one dose, veterans saw an 88% reductions in PTSD symptoms, and many walked away from decades of opioid use. One dose. I'll tell you how it works and how to access it. And I have to tell you, yesterday, as I was getting ready to film this episode, we got a call. And Leah, my fiance's brother, Justin, who's been missing for months, homeless, addicted, reached out. It was a blessing for our family. And I'll tell you what's happening with that. But first, I want to just give you a little bit of context. And people would have, called me an addict in my 20s and 30s. And that word comes from a Latin term for slave. It defines you by your change. It sounds like a verdict, something you are, not something you're doing. But I wasn't a slave. I'm not a slave. You're not a slave. Your friends and loved ones, they're not slaves. What all of us in the throes of addiction are actually doing is something researchers call compulsive comfort seeking. Think about that. Compulsive comfort seeking. It's not a moral failing. It's a nervous system that never felt safe, looking for some sort of relief. And that's not just people shooting heroin under a bridge. That's scrolling on your phone at 2 a.m. Or you can't stop shopping, or you can't be social without a drink. It's really most of us. And I was an early adopter on the drug thing. I mean, most kids my age were drawing dinosaurs. I was drawing pictures of bongs and weed. And this is before I could even get my hands on any of that. But my brain was doing market research, already shopping for the exit door. The University of Tennessee's Center for Addiction Sciences found that 92% of the 1,200 patients they studied had significant childhood trauma. And honestly, I think that number underestimates it. The ACE test that they use measures 10 broad categories. So if you were sexually abused every day for 15 years, but nothing else on that list applies, you don't score as having significant childhood abuse, but you're clearly traumatized. The test just doesn't really capture it. The truth is, almost everybody's struggling with compulsive comfort seeking. Whether that's substances, porn, shopping, scrolling, workaholism, whatever it is that takes you out of the present moment, almost all of us are running from pain that started long before we found the thing that helped us escape. But we are in a very special moment. There's a treatment that's changing everything. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about why this is so personal for me. So the first time I ever blacked out, I was 5 years old. It's 1974. It's my brother's high school graduation party. They had a keg and someone gave me a little Dixie cup with some beer in it, just a sip for the kid. It wasn't such a weird thing back in the 70s. But here's the thing. I was stationed at that keg. I was the refill guy. Every time someone needed more beer, little 5-year-old Steve was there to top them off. All the guys loved it. I loved it. I was the life of the party. And my identity was forming. And when they were filling theirs, I was filling mine. By the end of the night, I was on my swing set, spinning myself in circles, launching into the air and passing out in the yard. 5 years old, blacked out, passed out. And I didn't know why I wanted out. I didn't have words for it as a little kid. I just knew that being in my body in the present moment felt intolerable. And some part of me understood that there were substances out there that could take me somewhere else. So I spent decades finding every way possible to leave. I'm wearing my Greek hat today. Stavros has left the building. That was my goal growing up. But here's the thing, addiction doesn't have to be your life. the shame, the hiding, the feeling broken, all of that can end. And I know because I clawed my way out over 15 years with everything I could find: meditation, breath work, men's work, somatic therapy, psychedelic therapy, and all of that mattered. But at the end of the day, what it really came down to was a choice to change what I reached for when the pressure built up. And that's kind of like this framework that I've talked about before: curiosity, courage, and action. Get curious about what's actually happening in your body. Find the courage to face it instead of running, and then take some action. Reach for something that heals instead of something that numbs. And that's always going to be the work, and no medicine is going to do that work for you. But what if there was something that could open a window, something that could reset your brain so that you're not fighting against your childhood or your abuse or your war wounds, so that the choices that you're making can actually stick? So you're not white knuckling it for years while your dopamine receptors slowly heal. And that's what Ibogaine does. That's the promise of treating compulsive comfort seeking at the root. And, this is real to me. Right now, as I'm recording this, Leah's brother just reached out to us, and he's been missing for months, homeless, addicted to meth. And we've been searching for him and wondering if he was alive. And he's living with complex PTSD from a violent childhood. And he agreed to come to Colorado, but it's also fragile, no ID, no license. We're trying to stay in contact with him long enough to actually get him help. And even when we do, we'll have to fly him to Mexico because the treatment is illegal here. So this isn't like a theoretical thing. This is my life right now. And it's not just my life. There are millions of families right now going through the same thing, searching for someone they love, waiting for a phone call that they're terrified to get, watching someone disappear into addiction and not knowing how to pull them out. And if you're one of these people, I see you. That was me. I was in the throes of addiction. This episode is for you. I grew up in a house with violence. My father was a World War II veteran. He was decorated, brave. Harry Truman wrote him handwritten letters for his valor. He landed on D-Day 2, won multiple Silver Stars. But he came home from that broken. And there wasn't really a word for PTSD, back then. No treatment, no understanding. Just a man who'd seen way too much and had nowhere to put it. So he drank. And he raged. And that's the house I grew up in. I was sexually abused at 6, and I've talked about it before. The man who told me, who did it, told me he'd kill me if I spoke. Told me he'd kill my parents if I didn't keep coming back. I found my best friend floating dead in a swimming pool. So my nervous system was on fire before I hit double digits. I had an addict's body, but I didn't feel like a slave. And what do I mean by that, an addict's body? I mean that every single day there's a buildup. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be fine. I'm feeling great. But as the day went on, something starts accumulating in my system. And at 2 o'clock, I'd be, I am not going to use tonight. But deep down inside, I knew though. By 6 o'clock, the pressure's building, but I'm still pretending to myself that I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to use. By 9 o'clock, I am like, fuck it, I'll do anything just to get out of this state. So I did what any overwhelmed nervous system does. I found ways to cope. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I was running a successful hedge fund. And on paper, I had made it. I was sitting in buildings on Fifth Avenue with clients who own those buildings. Second largest privately owned company in the world. They gave us a $40 million investment allocation. And I went home and smoked crack until the sun came up. I couldn't feel the wind. I couldn't feel any of the good things. My nervous system was so overloaded from years of unprocessed trauma that even success couldn't really reach me. So I numbed. And the only way I knew how, alcohol, cocaine, crack, opioids, anything to change the state, anything to not feel what I was feeling. And this went on for years, decades, really. So my mom dies when I'm 27, and my safety in the world was gone. My nervous system that was already on fire just fucking exploded. And whatever was left of my ability to regulate it broke. And I was like achieving during the day and destroying myself at night. I'm living in New York City. I'm living the life, Instagram life before there was Instagram. But I knew deep down inside that if I stayed in New York with Coke delivery and all the apps, access that was available there, I'd be dead at 50. Like some rock star in a pool of his own vomit. And I had always never wanted to die in a pool of my own vomit. That was just a personal thing that I held. So I moved to Lake Tahoe for the mountains, but partly because I didn't think crack was available there. Now, I was still using cocaine, but slowly over years, it kind of diminished. I had kids. I moved to Maui, and I eventually stopped. But I clawed my way out, and it took 15 years. And here's what I want you to understand about an addiction, and this is really important. The dysregulation comes first. The addiction comes after that. I remember being a teenager, and if I was going to go to a party or really anywhere social, I would stand outside and chug 2 or 3 beers before I could even walk in the door, just to calm my system down, just to get my nervous system quiet enough to function around other people. And at that point, alcohol wasn't creating my problems, it was actually solving them. It was the best tool that my nervous system had found to manage sensations that felt unbearable. And so that's what compulsive comfort seeking actually is. It's not a moral failing, it's not a weakness, it's an adaptation. Your nervous system finds something that works and it holds on to that for dear life. But here's something that people don't talk about. For the past 3.5 years, I haven't had a drink. I've lost a bunch of weight. I've changed my behavior pattern. Anyone looking at me from the outside would say that he's doing great. He's turned it around. But what's also true is I still have that addict's body. So even after years off of alcohol and the hard stuff, the underlying dysregulation was still running. And I was just managing it with less destructive things, which is honestly a good strategy at first as you taper. A little weed at night, television, porn, honestly, whatever would release the valve, but the pressure was still there. Now, here's what's kind of shifted as my nervous system actually healed through meditation, breath work, chanting, sauna, yoga, all the practices I talk about on this show. The buildup itself has quieted, not just the substances, the underlying pressure that was driving everything. The addict's body settled. And this connects directly to why Ibogaine is so exciting. If you're addicted to opioids and you quit cold turkey, it can take 6 months to a year, sometimes longer, for your dopamine system to recover. That's 6 months, a year, or longer of walking around with diminished joy, diminished pleasure, your brain struggling to feel good about anything because the receptors are still recalibrating. And that's why people relapse, not because they're weak, but because months of gray and joyless existence while you're trying to build a new life is almost impossible to endure. I mean, think about it. Most people can't endure 5 minutes of silence without breaking out their phone. So imagine 18 months of diminished, gray, joyless life. But what Ibogaine appears to do is reset those receptors rapidly and in one treatment. It takes a brain that's been hijacked and returns it to something like the pre-addiction state. So you're not cured, you still have to do the work, but you get to do that work while you're actually feeling things again. You get to build your new life without months or years of that gray and joyless fog. It's kind of like a dementor from Harry Potter just dragging you back down. Imagine trying to build a new life in the clutches of a dementor. um, and this isn't just my story. I mean, I told you about my father, and he was a genuine war hero. And he came home and drowned it all in alcohol because there was no word for what he had. He didn't have a treatment. And, the other side of that house was my mom. And she had cancer for 20 years. She had 10 operations, both of her breasts removed. Her body was being destroyed slowly, basically the whole time I was growing up. And I talked to her before she died, and I asked her why she never left my dad. And she said she didn't know if he'd be responsible enough to take care of me. She didn't even know if she could get a bank account, on her own. That was the era. So she stayed, and she sacrificed her life for mine. And I knew it was happening even then. And there was a lot of shame around that I held for a long time. But now that I have kids, I see it differently. She broke 3 ribs putting on her dress to come to my wedding. Her body was so riddled with cancer that the act of getting dressed to watch her son get married shattered her ribs. She never left the hospital after that. And a month later, she was gone. And, I want to just say something about who she was. 800 people came to her funeral. And she wasn't famous. She wasn't prominent. She was just an extraordinarily kind and loving person. That's it. And that's why 800 people showed up for her. They had bleachers in the fucking parking lot. And even when I was a stuttering kid getting in trouble, she believed in me. She always stood by me, showed me love. And I really believed that I would be dead without her love and her care. And here's what I want you to hear. Just one person in a chaotic world who shows care, support, confidence in you can be the difference between life and death. My mom was that person for me. Her name was Helen Support. And when she died, I was 27. I lost my anchor. And that's when my nervous system finally broke completely. I mean, that's when the crack took over. My dad's unprocessed trauma became my childhood, and her love kept me alive through it. And my compulsive comfort seeking, what we call addiction, that's what happened when she was gone. That's how this thing moves through families, through generations. Trauma and love tangled together. Compulsive comfort seeking, we don't have to look down on the people that have had these experiences. We can love them and lift them up because they are our family. They're your brother, your sister, your nephew. My nephew, Paul, he was 28 years old. And he wasn't on the streets. He wasn't what people picture when they think of addict. He's a promising, smart, hilarious young guy who bought what he thought was a Percocet. And it was fake. It had fentanyl in it. One pill. One decision. And he's gone. And this is happening everywhere right now. Fentanyl is in everything. Kids are dying from pills they buy thinking they're safe. And most of them aren't junkies. They're just people in pain, looking for relief, who made one choice and never woke up. I think about this friend I had from high school. So the first time we ever came back from college on Thanksgiving break, a bunch of us were doing cocaine at a friend's house. And this guy, it was his first time. And I remember this so vividly. He snorted a line. He got up. He paced around the table. And he said, "I could see how this shit could rule your life." First line, first time. And he saw it immediately. And I don't remember a lot of my life. It's common for people with a lot of trauma. But that moment is burned into my memory. He's been to rehab over 40 times. 40 times. Think about that. 40 attempts to get free, 40 times through the system, and still struggling. And that's not a moral failing, that's a broken treatment model. That's a brain that's been hijacked. And we keep sending people back to the programs that don't address what's actually happening neurologically. Leah, my fiance's sister, died from heroin. I don't need to say a lot more about that. You know what that does to a family, the hole that it leaves forever. And right now, Leah's brother just made contacts after months of being missing. You know, he's somewhere in Michigan, addicted to meth on Suboxone, which takes months potentially to taper off before Ibogaine's even possible. He had the same kind of childhood that broke his sister. He was badly physically abused starting at the age of 3. Think about that, the age of 3. He never really had a chance. Hey, quick pause before we keep going. If this conversation is landing with you, become part of the Neuro's Journey community by subscribing and following along for more stories like this of courage and the science of healing. I'd love for you to drop a comment below and share what part of the episode hit home for you. The more we share, learn, and show of ourselves, the more we heal. The same kind of dysregulation that drives people to just substances so they can survive another day. And we have a plan to get him to Colorado, to get him stable, to eventually get him to Mexico for Ibogaine treatment. But we have to hold on to him first. And so this is my life right now. This is not abstract. This is not something I read in a study. My father, my mother, my nephew, my friend, Leah's sister, Leah's brother, me. But here's the thing, it's not just my lineage, this is our lineage as a species. We're all compulsively comfort-seeking with something. The biggest corporations in the world know it, and they spend billions of dollars engineering products designed to hijack our dopamine systems. Your phone, your social media feed, fuck the food you eat, the shows you binge. And they're not selling you products, they're selling you relief from discomfort of being present. Same game, different drug. Then they're selling you products. And the only real difference between smoking crack and somebody scrolling on Instagram at 2 a.m. is the substance and, the repercussions. But the nervous system is doing the same thing, looking for the exit door. So when I talk about addiction, I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about all of us. And the question isn't whether you're compulsively seeking comfort. The question is what you're reaching for and whether it's healing you or hurting you. And this is the lineage of addiction and trauma. But it doesn't have to keep repeating. And that's why I'm telling you about this medicine. That's why this matters so much to me. So let's talk about what the medicine actually is and what it does to your brain. Ibogaine comes from a shrub in West Africa, and it's been used for centuries in spiritual ceremonies. But what's getting the researchers exciting isn't the spiritual part, it's what happens neurologically. But first, let me tell you what it's not. It's not a maintenance drug like Suboxone or methadone, where you're trading one dependency for another. Those drugs, they occupy your opioid receptors so you don't go into withdrawal, but you have to take them every day, sometimes for years, sometimes literally forever. And here's what gets me about that. Maintenance drugs are a business model. That's recurring revenue every day, forever. And it's not a good business model? A medicine that works in one treatment. So the same pharmaceutical industry that created the opioid crisis, now they're making money off the treatment. Create the problem, sell the solution, and make sure that solution requires a daily dose forever. And Ibogaine doesn't fit that model. One treatment, no recurring revenue, no lifetime customers. Maybe that's why it's been ignored for 50 plus years. It's different. It appears to actually reset the system. And here's what the science is showing. When you're addicted, your brain changes. Your dopamine receptors get depleted from all that artificial flooding. Your baseline drops. Your brain stops producing its own feel-good chemicals at like the normal levels. And you end up in this state where nothing feels good without the substance. And that's not a character flaw, that's the neurochemistry. And what Ibogaine does is interact with multiple brain systems at once. Researchers call it a pharmacological shotgun because it hits so many targets simultaneously. Your serotonin system, your opioid receptors, other systems, all these different pathways that are involved in addiction. And the really wild part is a single dose of Ibogaine triggers massive increases in something called brain-derived nootropic factor. This is the protein that helps your neurons grow and repair. In some studies, it increased 2 to 3,000% in the brain's reward centers after an Ibogaine treatment. Dr. Gould Dolan, a neuroscientist from UC Berkeley, has been studying exactly this. And her research shows that psychedelic acts as what she calls master keys to reopen critical periods of brain plasticity. And what's a critical period? It's a window of time when your brain is wide open to learning from the environment, like when you were a child. That's why kids can learn languages so easily. Their brains are in this malleable and open state. But as we get older, those windows close. The brain becomes less plastic, harder to change, harder to overwrite the old patterns. And what Dr. Dolan discovered is that psychedelics can reopen those windows. And here's what's fascinating about Ibogaine specifically. It keeps the brain in that open, malleable state longer than any other psychedelic they tested. 4 weeks in that research. But she found something else. The length of the plasticity window correlates with the duration of the experience itself. And Ibogaine produces the longest experience, I think, of any psychedelics. And the clinicians working with it report that this window of enhanced plasticity might extend even longer, months longer. Some say 3 months or more. And so this is why clinics like Beyond, where my fiancée Leah did her treatment, don't just give you a single dose and send you home. After the initial flood dose, they give you smaller doses over the following days. And what they're doing is strategically extending the length of time of the experience to then keep that critical period open longer, to maximize the window where your brain can actually change. 4 weeks, maybe 3 months, where your brain is more like a child's brain, where you can build new patterns, overwrite the old circuits, actually change. And so that's what we're talking about. So the research, let's talk about the research a little bit, because this is where it kind of honestly gets hard to believe. So Stanford published a study on special operations veterans. And these guys are, they have traumatic brain injuries, severe PTSD, depression, addiction. These are the most treatment resistant cases you can actually imagine. And after one Ibogaine treatment, an 88% reduction in PTSD symptoms, 87% reduction in depression, 81% reduction in anxiety, and suicidal ideation, thinking about suicide, dropped from 47% to 7%. One treatment, not 6 months of therapy, not years of medication adjustment, one time. And these numbers are unlike anything we've seen in addiction or trauma medicine ever, honestly, that I know of. And I want to tell you about the man who led this research. His name was Dr. Nolan Williams, and he was 43 years old. He dedicated his life to developing these treatments for depression and trauma. He created breakthrough therapies that saved countless lives. And in October of this year, he died by suicide. The man who helped develop treatments for suicidal ideation lost his own battle with depression. So if that doesn't tell you that we're all in this together, nothing will. The stigma of this has to end. This isn't about those people. This is all of us. The researchers, the veterans, the hedge fund managers smoking crack, the little kid at the keg, your cousin, your family member, your friends, your husband, your wife, we are all fighting the same thing. And Dr. Williams's work will continue to save lives. And I've seen the results of his research with my own eyes. When Leah did her treatment at Beyond in Cancun, I sat in the daily gratitude circles for 2 or 3 days. And I watched veterans who Leah described as broken, despondent, and when she first met them, men who told me they were literally going to commit suicide if this treatment didn't work. And by the end of the week, when I met them, bubbly, happy, engaged in life, laughing, present. I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you exactly what was happening in their brain, but I can tell you what I saw. And I saw people that were back to life, that were so grateful to have a new lease on life. And no, look, this is not a magic cure. You still have to do the work. You still have to address the trauma, build new patterns, change your life. Ibogaine isn't doing all of that for you. But what it does is it gives you a fighting chance. It gives you insights into what's happened in your life, how they've affected you, how they're affecting your behavior now. And then it opens that window. It takes the neurological boot off of your neck long enough for you to stand up. And it lets you do the work of recovery while your brain is actually capable of changing. That's what we're talking about. That's the opportunity. But here's the thing, even with all of this, Ibogaine is not a magic bullet. I know I threw a lot of impressive numbers at you, and it can sound like a miracle. And in some ways it is, but the medicines opens the window, the portal. You still have to walk through it. The research is clear. Long-term success depends on what happens after treatment, aftercare, integration, having a plan, having support. The people who do best aren't the ones who take Ibogaine and just go back to their old lives. They're the ones that use that window of plasticity to build something new. And that's why I'm so supportive of projects like One and Done. One and Done is an amazing product and project. It's an integration center being built in Texas by a man named Tony Glace. And here's what they're doing. They know Ibogaine isn't legal in the US now, but they also know that veterans need help right now. So they're building the integration infrastructure before the treatment is even legal here. So veterans can go to Mexico for Ibogaine treatment at a legitimate clinic, and then they can come back to Texas and work with One and Done for a full integration program, therapy, support, community, the work that actually makes the treatment stick. And that's the model. That's what responsible Ibogaine treatment looks like. It's not just the medicine. It's the medicine plus integration plus ongoing support. And that's how you take a powerful intervention and turn it into lasting change. And this is why the advocacy matters. This is why we need to change the laws, not so people can take Ibogaine unsupervised in their living room, but so we can build a real infrastructure, real clinics, real integration programs, so people don't have to fly to another country to get help. One of the pillars of this podcast is the hero's journey. And there's research from the University of North Carolina showing that people who view their lives through the hero's journey lens, who see themselves as the protagonist of their own story, facing challenges, finding allies, growing through adversity, those people have more meaning, more happiness, more love in their life. And the good news is you can learn to reframe your life through this lens and get those benefits. And part of the hero's journey is allies show up when you heed the call. And psychedelics have been an ally for me. Absolutely an essential ingredient to my transformation. Not the only ingredient, mind you, but an important one. And I think that's what's happening at a collective level right now. These medicines have been around for thousands of years, but historically, only a small portion of humanity has ever had access to them. Now we're potentially on the cusp of mass adoption. That's never happened before in human history. I think psychedelics are showing up as an ally for all of us right now at this critical moment. I think we can all sense that this is a critical moment in our history, And Ibogaine is part of that. So why is it illegal? Well, here's the absurd truth. In 1970, the government passed the Controlled Substances Act and swept up a bunch of psychedelics into Schedule 1. Ibogaine got grouped in with everything else, but there was no individual evaluation. No one looked at the specific compound and made a scientific determination about its risks and benefits. It just got swept up in the wave. This is a psychedelic. And here's the thing, nobody parties with Ibogaine. It actually decreases activities in the brain's pleasure centers. So unlike psychedelics, there's no euphoria, no high, no fun. This is the least threatening psychedelic to the man. I mean, nobody's sneaking off to do Ibogaine at Coachella. It's a medicine for people doing real work. It's not pleasurable, but it's life-changing. It's a medicine for desperate people, people who've tried it all, people who are dying. And for 50 years, it's been illegal. Not because anybody studied it and decided it was dangerous, but because of bureaucratic laziness in 1970. 50 years of people dying from addiction while an effective treatment sat on the shelf. That makes me sad. I'm not going to lie, a little angry. You know, when I think about my nephew Paul, when I think about Leah's sister, when I think about my friend who's been to 40 rehabs, about Justin, homeless, suffering, all these people, all this pain, and a potential treatment has been locked away because of paperwork from 1970s. But I'm not wallowing in anger. I feel an opportunity. Things are shifting and there's real hope right now. So what's happening is in June of this year, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill committing $50 million to Ibogaine research. That's the largest government investment in psychedelic medicine ever. And it requires dollar for dollar matching. So we're potentially talking about $100 million in total. This passed the Texas Senate 26-5 and the House 134-4 in Texas. It's not a liberal state. And you know who's behind this? Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, former Secretary of Energy, conservative Republican. Now he's the chair of Americans for Ibogaines. And he likes to call himself a knuckle-dragging conservative. And he's taken a real risk to his reputation to advocate for psychedelics because he's seen what they can do. That's courage. That's heroism right there. Thank you, Rick Perry. I like to call myself a knuckle-dragging liberal. And here we are, working towards the same thing. That's what this issue does. It brings people together. Because when you've watched someone you love die from addiction, when you've seen a veteran come home broken and get no help, you stop caring about the political labels. You just want something that works. It's not a left-right issue anymore. There is a coalition of conservatives and liberals who have seen what this medicine can do and are working together to make it available. So you know who testified for that Texas bill? Marcus Luttrell, Navy SEAL, Navy Cross recipient, one of the most decorated special ops guys in American history. And he told the Texas legislator that Ibogaine ended his opiate addiction. Arizona has committed $5 million for trials. Colorado, Indiana, Massachusetts, New York, Kentucky, Louisiana, Washington, they all have active legislation. The FDA commissioner has said psychedelic treatments are one of our top priorities. So things are moving. But here's what breaks my heart. Right now, today, if you're a veteran with PTSD or addiction and you want Ibogaine treatment, you have to leave the country. Marcus Luttrell, a hero, had to leave America to get treatment for his opioid addiction. Our veterans are medical refugees. I think about my own father, a veteran, what his life could have been, what my mother's life could have been if he had access to something like this. If there had been a treatment that could actually help him process what he saw, instead of just numbing it out with brown liquor until it destroyed him and everyone in our house. And we can't go back and save my father, but we can change things for the veterans coming home now, for people struggling right now, for Justin. So here's what I want you to do. If this resonates with you, if you want to be part of changing this, go to americansforibogaine.org. So Americans for Ibogaine is a nonprofit working to advance public understanding and get responsible access to Ibogaine. Go to americansforibogaine.org. Follow them on Instagram. Their phone number, 404-368-9923. You can call them. You can get involved. And this is how things change, not by waiting, but by showing up. So let me bring this home. I started this episode telling you about a 5-year-old kid at a keg. A kid whose nervous system was already on fire. A kid who spent decades finding every possible way to escape his own body. And that kid is now in his mid-50s, and he's still here. Not because I'm special, not because I had more willpower than anyone else. I got lucky. I had a mother that loved me so fiercely that she sacrificed her own life for mine. And I eventually found practices and medicines that helped my nervous system calm down because I clawed myself out one day at a time over years. But it shouldn't be that hard. If you're listening to this now and you're struggling, I want you to hear me. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not a moral failure. Your nervous system found a way to survive. Compulsive comfort seeking, whatever form it takes, was just your brain's best attempt to manage something that felt unmanageable. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something for us all to understand. And there's a way out. And it might not be Ibogaine. It might be yoga. It might be meditation. It might be community. It might be all of it. But there is a path, and you deserve to find it. Just one person who shows care, support, or confidence can be the difference between life and death. And my mom was that person for me. And maybe someone here can be that person for someone else. If you're not struggling yourself but know someone who is, here's what I want you to understand. That addiction isn't what you think it is. It's not about bad choices or lack of discipline. It's compulsive comfort seeking. It's a nervous system that got overwhelmed and found the only relief it could. When you understand that, you can stop judging and start helping. Support the people in your life who are fighting this, and support the efforts to make better treatments available. Go to americansforibogaine.org. Learn about what's happening. Get involved. This is how we break the cycle, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that come after this. I think about my father's trauma becoming my childhood, and my childhood becoming addiction. And I think about my kids, Athena and Apollo. I really wish they could have met their grandmother. But the cycle can stop with me. The cycle can stop with you. That's what this work is about. We were so blessed to find Justin, and we're still hoping to support him. We're hoping to give him a shot at a life that he deserves. He's smart and funny and kind, and he deserves a chance at life. And he didn't get it when he was young. And I don't know how that story ends, but I do believe there's a chance. I believe these medicines can help him in a way that they've helped so many others. And I believe we're at a turning point for Ibogaine, for psychedelics, for how we understand addiction and trauma, for all of it. The allies are showing up. The question is whether we're going to show up too. I'm Steve Sapourn, and this is the Neuro's Journey. And I understand what it feels like to be broken and lost. And I know there's a way out. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining the Neuro's Journey podcast. If this episode landed, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The real medicine is in the connection, and this community only grows when we reach for each other. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. And if you have a minute, leaving a rating really helps more people find this work. And keep showing up for your own journey. Every small act of courage matters. For you, for the people around you, and for all of us. I am so grateful to be walking this path with you.